Justice for whistleblowers! Justice for residents! Justice for the people!
A political organizing group is pointing fingers at Senator Diane Feinstein and Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, saying that they're covering up a major scandal all for their political benefit. So we know that the federal government has spent about 12 years and $1 billion trying to clean up contamination left over from the naval base that used to operate out of Hunters Point. The site was used as a dumping ground for radioactive material at one time, but the city of San Francisco wants to turn that land into much-needed housing facilities. Last week, the Navy held a public meeting to talk about additional cleanup efforts, but there's not a lot of trust coming from the people who live near the area.
Hunters Point Shipyard was where depleted uranium was tested. One of the bombs that was dropped on Japan left Hunters Point. So we are talking about cesium, plutonium, high levels of lead, mercury. Our children, our infants, our youth, our young adults, our seniors, bombarded daily that live close by. The health department, that's the San Francisco Health Department, has empirical data. As Steve was telling you, the Navy themselves, they have empirical data about the situation. But our two representatives, Nancy Pelosi and Diane Feinstein, do not have the guts to represent the people. We got to fight for our infants. We got to fight for our children. We got to fight for our youth. Yes. We got to fight for our young adults. We got to fight for our seniors. Many of our seniors are suffering. The ones that are poor, the ones that the category in which they are, it's called no income, because literally they get no income and they are suffering. They're bombarded every day by cesium, plutonium. Depleted uranium was tested on Hunters Point. What else do you want? What else do you want?
You know, they're victims here. They're people who have been terribly harmed by this criminal cover-up that Nancy Pelosi and Feinstein have been involved in. We're not just talking about money. We're talking about people dying. We're talking about children getting sick.
That's right.
That's what we're talking about. I mean, in fact, these are crimes. And they're involved in a RICO to cover up this development regardless of the cost, regardless of who dies, regardless of who gets cancer. That is criminal. And they have to be held accountable.
Treasure Island and Hunters Point are Siamese twins. They are umbilically connected by the history, the naval history, and by the toxics and pollutants that were dumped on both of them, ranging from cesium-137 to plutonium. These are powerful radioactive materials, and the Navy on Treasure Island admitted this month that you can never get rid of radiation. They admitted this in public for the first time. I'm going to wait till the siren goes by. I have been researching and reporting on Treasure Island because it seems to have been hit by a media blockade by the power players in the federal and the state and city government, starting with Diane Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi, and Willie Brown, who set up the Treasure Island Development Authority on Treasure Island in before 1997, when it was decommissioned. He set this up and he got Lennar involved. So Willie Brown is still active and he's still controlling the situation at Treasure Island because all of the members of the Treasure Island Development Authority board are appointed by the mayor. And that's basically Willie Brown. I want to point out that I like the word collusion for what is being talked about here, because this is a case of collusion by, I have counted them, about 30 power players, starting with Pelosi, Feinstein, Jane Kim. Jane Kim was repeatedly asked to help sick people on Treasure Island who are being evicted, and she didn't help anybody. HUD, Aubrey Patterson, who's here today, who is a whistleblower, give great credit to Aubrey and Felecia, the first female whistleblower on Treasure Island, because they pointed out that HUD is deeply involved in the collusion. That's why not talking about. I have an article that's going to come out on the San Francisco Bayview newspaper that talks about 7 sick people and what they went through. I've already written about Aubrey and Felecia, who are here, and the sicknesses that they've had. If you don't mind my saying so, Aubrey has tumors on his back and his shoulder from living on Treasure Island, he believes. Felecia has had violent kidney pain, and I was able to find out that she was living over a powerful source of radiation that was right under her house. And the 2 people who Felecia lived on the top floor. The two people who lived on the lower floor, closer to the radioactive source, died. They died. Felicia's life was probably saved by the fact that she lived on the top floor. So these people have been used. They've been taken out to this island and used for their rents for this redevelopment. And the people involved in doing that are Nancy Pelosi, Diane Feinstein, Jane Kim, HUD, and a host, 30 other players who know what's going on and have continued what Steve calls a strange silence about it. That's collusion, that's obstruction of justice, that's fraud.
Again, my name is Barry Hermanson. I'm a Green Party candidate for Congress here in San Francisco. You'll see my name on the June ballot, June 5th ballot. There's 7 candidates altogether. We are trying to challenge Nancy Pelosi and actually hold her accountable. Every year, we spend an enormous amount of money on our military. Both sides of the aisle in Washington vote overwhelmingly to fund the military. This year, the vote in the House was 344 to 81, and in the Senate was 89 to 8 to give Trump more money than he had requested for the military. $700 billion for this year. And for next year, for the first time that I can ever remember, they passed a 2-year defense appropriations budget. Why? I think it's because they don't want to have to be talking about it and voting on such an issue leading up to the midterm elections for both Republicans and Democrats. I believe that they colluded together to do this. And the reason why I mention these just enormous numbers is that where's the budget for cleaning up all the Superfund sites that we have in America? Everywhere our military goes, we leave tremendous amounts of pollution everywhere in the world. People are getting sick, people are dying. I'm a former small business owner. Owned and operated a business in the upper market area of the city for 25 years and employed a lot of people. If I failed my clients, if my employees failed my clients, I would not only lose a particular client, I would be out of business. 95 to 90% failure rate? This is unbelievable. Now, I'm not making a statement against federal contracting to get jobs done, but there needs to be action to make sure that this company, Tetra Tech, not only loses its business, very lucrative business with the federal government, but that it should be run out of business altogether. This is unacceptable. And anyone who would contract with such a firm, this is to waste $1 billion. Oh my God, what we could do with that money.
Today, so welcome.
Hi, I'm Aubrey Patterson, and I was on Treasure Island from 2004 to 2013. I am mentally disabled, and I was in a program called Shelter Plus Care, which is ran through HUD, and it's for people that are mentally disabled. And they put me on the island, and they didn't tell me it was radiation out there. And I had a ground unit. I have two cancerous tumors. I went through a serious meltdown for my health, and I complained to my landlord, which everyone is not saying anything who our landlord is. Our landlord is the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of San Francisco. They get our rent money. That's who gets our rent money, the Roman Catholic Archdiocese. How can a church that's supposed to love God put the parishioners on a contaminated site? And if you say anything about it, they'll throw you off the island. Everyone's involved in this cover-up. HUD is the biggest player of this contamination. HUD Rule 24, CFR 50.3, prohibitive use of a contaminated site, which means the program should have never launched on Treasure Island. HUD is responsible for allowing the city of San Francisco to fraud them out of $44 billion in 20 years. Jane Kim is one of the main factors of Tetra Tech getting soft money to run for the state senate, and she lost that position. Now she's running for the mayor, but she will not say anything about the contamination in her district. She needs to be indicted this morning for attempted murder and murder, because we've had 35 tenants to die on Treasure Island, and the landlord is sitting around the Roman Catholic Archdiocese and getting fat, and everyone is coming up with the Catholic Church. The church needs to be accountable for all the deaths on Treasure Island.
Yeah.
Justice.
Hi, I'm Felecia Sample, and I lived on Treasure Island from 2004 to 2017 for 13 years, and that I lived right by 1101 Bigelow Court, where Don Wadsworth, a Navy expert who works with the Navy, had extensive experience with working with radiation, said that the people were not supposed to ever live out there on Treasure Island. And I live right by, less than 50 feet. I have an enlarged heart. I had bad kidney problems. Almost died twice. I was emaciated when I went to the hospital where they had to admit me. I never had any health problems or anything like that. And that I moved out this last year in October 2017, and Max Garcia has put 2 other people in that apartment, 1406 Sturgeon Apartment B, on Treasure Island. That's right by 1101 Bigelow Court, and 2 people live there since I moved out in October 2017, and that is really bad. The first lady that moved in there, she got sick and she had to move, so they moved someone else in there. It's really bad out there. So I just want to let you know that that's my story.
I was very shocked last Thursday on the radio on KQED. We heard one of our city supervisors trying to say that there's a difference between what's happened at Hunters Point and what's happening right now at Treasure Island.
What is your name?
Oh, and my name is Bradley Wiedmeyer. I'm a healthcare worker in San Francisco. I'm in SEIU 2015, and I wrote years ago, almost 9 years ago, about the switch of Hunters Point land was delivered to the people, and clean Candlestick Point land was given to Lennar to develop, and it was part of the deal with the Alice Griffin projects, which are finally being built. But the thing was, public land was given that was relatively clean, at least not radiologically a disaster, which Hunters Point still is. We found now that the testing was completely falsified at Hunters Point, and it's being pursued and tested by the same company on Treasure Island. What does that say? It's like just more of the same. You know, do we have to have an international inquiry? Don't we have a government that's supposed to be investigating crimes?
Yep.
Right, especially when they don't investigate themselves. So we have to demand that there be a federal inquiry and that there be federal prosecutions on this. This is outrageous. The entire city government, county government, and it leads into the state party are behind covering this up. It's outrageous. We heard the District 10 supervisor saying that things are okay, looking good at Treasure Island. It was an outrage. It was an outrage, and I was deeply shocked that this kind of garbage, after a decade and $1 billion, and we're worse off because we've had people get sick, and people will be getting sick. This was serious mistakes by the federal government bringing back the ships and cleaning the ships that went through the hydrogen bomb tests. My father was in the Navy, and he was a healthy 83-year-old and died within a week from a cancer, a blood cancer that just sort of turned on and gone. He was, you know, and he was in those thousands and thousands of naval personnel that were sent to go through these hydrogen bomb tests. Well, the issue here that connects it and connects him, he did serve sometime at Hunters Point later, but the issue is that those ships were cleaned, allegedly, and the residue we have left with us. And it has not been cleaned up. The movement called for clean it, don't cap it, and they shut down the RAD, they shut down the cleanup, and now we're living with the results of that, and we need action. We need an inquiry, and we need federal prosecutions of this criminal behavior.
Lack of our lawmakers doing what they're hired to do. They're for years and years they're not doing their jobs. We need to start doing stronger resistance, and I really believe in going to their homes. We did a camp out back in 2007 for a whole week in front of Pelosi and Feinstein's homes, and then another few months later we did 2 weeks while we were on a hunger fast to protest the funding of the Iraq War. But you know, we were at their houses on the weekend in protest of the 100 missiles that were sent into Syria. Now, how much do each one of those missiles cost? I don't even know. Does anybody know the price tag on one missile that was sent to Syria? Was it?
10 million.
Per each missile?
1.24, I think.
$224 million of our tax dollars blown into thin air for no good reason. That I don't know how many people were harmed from it, but you know, we need to start doing so much more than what we're doing. So I say let's have an encampment, bring the people that were, you know, harmed by having them live on these toxic lands, bring them on the property of Pelosi and Feinstein's, on their sidewalks, and do a week-long encampment.
Yes.
You'll get some media out there. I can count on it. And tell them if they're not going to do something about it. I mean, the election's coming up for Pelosi.
Sure is.
This is the way to put pressure on her and demand that she do the right thing. Of course, she's not going to, but we can at least get the problem out in the media more.
With what is a whistleblower? A whistleblower is somebody whose moral compass cannot be compromised. They have courage and the fortitude to stand up for what's right because they have passion about their job and keeping the American public safe and doing their job perfectly. Oftentimes a whistleblower is looked at as a troublemaker, somebody who brings problem to the workplace. Well, ask yourself, if they're getting 100% on all their evaluations and they're doing a great job and they're being recognized for their job and the level of service that they're providing, how can they be a troublemaker? Because generally a troublemaker is not one of the highest producers in the workplace. We all know that. So Michael Madry was not able to make it for us here today to speak. So on his behalf, I brought forth his 95-page sworn affidavit to the corruption and collusion between the federal government and Test America, who Michael Madry was a quality assurance manager who handled a lot of the asbestos testing and can verify and validate the fact that there's no way that you can adequately test in 10 seconds. Not possible, not humanly possible. Michael Madry has suffered tremendously through this. This man has not been employed for over 7 years. Nobody will touch him with a 10-foot pole. Yet this is the hardest working, most intelligent man I think I've ever met. Does his job well, and takes pride in it. Michael Madry has been reduced to a house that's falling down around him. He can barely keep it. He has come close to foreclosure several times, but by the grace of God, he's been able to pull through. Michael Madry eats out of a dumpster because he can't afford to buy food. Michael Madry's house is falling down. He cannot afford to maintain his house. These are the consequences that this man are paying for what he stood up for. And that's really an atrocity. Michael Madry has had communications with Diane Feinstein, Pelosi, the Obama administration, several of the leadership here within OSHA Region 9 who no longer are in this office. It cannot be said that nobody knows who Michael Madry is or his case. He is very detail-oriented and extremely articulate, and yet a deaf ear. no matter how much he has. Representing the company that I was facing, I was retaliated against for 7 years. The company would not touch me with a 10-foot pole. Again, I was viewed as a troublemaker. I am not a troublemaker. If you were to look at my evaluations, that were all random by the FAA, the National Weather Service, Quality Assurance, and my supervisors, all random over a period of several months. Never did I score anything less than 100%. But because I stood for something that compromised safety, I was punished for that. For 7 years, a lot of employers would not touch me. I would interview for jobs, and I would really ace that interview, and I knew I had that job. But suddenly, not long after the interview, the company would grow cold. My point of contacts would no longer talk to me. They wouldn't have anything to do with me, and I was always kind of bewildered, wondering, I know I'm very qualified for this job, and I know I do this job very well. What happened? I can't prove it, but there is reason to believe that when potential employers would look at me as a new employee, they would contact my former employer, and my former employer would not say nice things, which really is illegal. I was a constituent of Congressman Matt Salmon at that time. He is now retired. He, at that time, was on the funding for OSHA, the committee for the funding of OSHA. So he had a particular interest in this case. Unfortunately, he was not able to help me, and I settled with the company for something less than the statute, or 21, would require. So I am here today on behalf of Darrell Whitman and Michael Madry and myself. Because of the corruption and the collusion still continues within the federal government, there needs to be a congressional investigation. There needs to be some reform in this whistleblower protection program. It is completely corrupt. These guys communicate and collaborate with corporate attorneys and allows these large corporations to continue operating with impunity. There is no consequences. They should be subject to the same laws, rules, and regulations as I myself, the American public, has to obey as well. So with that, I also will be, yes?
Could you give the name again? I was talking to my cameraman person here and I blanked it out.
Okay.
And could you again please tell what you whistleblew on? What was your issue you want to
Okay. So my name is Aran Struckey. I was a whistleblower in an Air 21 case against a former company who I'm not allowed to say their name because of the settlement agreement that we did do. I would not mention their name, nor would I belittle them or talk down about them. So to some degree, I'm limited to what I can say. However, what I can say is when it finally came time to do the settlement between myself and my former employer, so many years had passed because of the foot dragging of leadership at OSHA management. It really wasn't fair to reinstate me with back pay and damages, which is what OSHA called for. So many hundreds of thousands of dollars had already been invested into me as an employee, and so many years had passed. It wasn't really fair to the company to have to retrain me and recertify me. So we basically shook hands, parted our ways. But I was involved in the air traffic control industry. And so I worked with the aircraft and the safety of aircraft which were airborne, and even of potential flights. So with that, I will also be
Now just become a hero of mine.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So with that, I will also be submitting a formal criminal complaint and affidavit to the U.S. Attorney's Office to supplement Michael Madry's. I work very closely with Darrell Whitman. Darrell Whitman did investigate my case, found my case to be a merit case, slam dunk, because I was able to actually cite the laws that I obeyed, which contradicted company policies. And the company refused to settle with me and refused to reinstate me. And that's okay. Absolutely. So the company that finally did hire me after a 7-year battle of trying to get employment is the very first company that is in the aerospace industry that allowed me the opportunity to explain my case, why I was terminated, what I was terminated for, show that I obeyed the law and I did the morally right thing to do. And this is the one company that gave me the chance and actually re-employed me. And I am forever grateful for that job. I am eternally thankful. And they definitely have my loyalties in every aspect of the word. So there is hope. We just can't give up.
Justice for whistleblowers!